All right. So I've got some slides for you, but I just want to start by checking in to see kind of what are you curious about? What would be meaningful for you from our time together today? And or what drew you to narrative coaching?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether Cheryl mentioned we're both business partners.
Hmm.
We're also a colleague of Lillian, who went through
Ah,
narrative coaching.
oh,
So you know Lillian Bay?
yes, very well.
Yeah, so
Oh, gosh. So there'll be some basis for comparison then.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we're all based in Kuala Lumpur. Lillian is in Singapore.
Hmm.
I think what I like to know is really I'm both Cheryl and myself, we are certified coaches. We have been coaching for the past what? How long has it been? Maybe since some time ago, I would
Quite
think.
a long time.
About-
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I have.
definitely over a decade
Yeah.
or
Okay.
or two. Yeah.
Yes, so we have coach C minus one, minus two. We're looking, so Lillian spoke highly of narrative coaching and just like to understand a bit more. I suppose how is it different from, if you like, the conventional coaching styles, and also maybe the modules that that it covers, the
Sure.
timing, yeah, because of
Sure.
the different time zone that we're in.
Yes.
How
Mm.
long it would
And
be.
also maybe also perhaps how it compares with um other programs that focus on different things. It's just so that we can make a value judgment
Sure.
on, yeah, which one's appropriate for us.
Okay.
Lisa is
Yeah.
one of the participants, or with David
Yeah.
from.
So I took narrative coaching a couple years back. And I was just reading over the email and seeing that, the invitation was out for new participants as well as returning. So I'm interested just in, how will that experience be different this time around? I have a general idea based on what I've read in terms of how it's going to be structured. I believe your role, David's
Hmm.
going to be a little bit different. So I like to understand that.
Yeah.
Also, just understanding too, as returning, like, how are the pure pods structured as well? And is that mandatory or is there flexibility there? Um, and I think that's about it. Yeah. And I would just say that the narrative coaching, I think probably has had the biggest impact on my coaching in terms of presence. And so I was very intrigued when I saw this again, when I took out all my materials from narrative coaching from last
Mhm.
time around. It's kind of like now that I've even gathered more information and been in a different type of presence in coaching. Even when I'm reading it too, it seems like I'm picking up more second time around. So
Yes.
I think you almost need to take it twice. The first time around is a bit of a shock factor. The second time, I think, even now I was just reading it the other day, just like, oh yes, yes, yep, that totally makes sense. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I'm here, is just to find out more and see more about the structure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Um, so let me, a couple of my early slides would answer some of these questions. So we can use those as a point of beginning, and then we can kind of dive more into the program in detail. So just as a bit of context for this, so I've been in the coaching space for nearly 30 years. And when I started, there weren't really many coaching books. And so I was cobbling together coaching programs for companies, for graduate programs. Then I finished my PhD and created narrative coaching. But from the very beginning, I was kind of turned off by most traditional coaching, frankly. I just found it pretty formulaic, and I thought people don't really work like that. And so I'd come out of a early career in which I was doing a lot of grief counseling. So I was just really intrigued by how different kinds of people move through change or loss and how their stories were so important in that process. And so a couple of the distinctions around narrative coaching. So we don't set agendas and goals for the most part, because I don't find them very useful for most people. And most people don't really know why they're in a session until they get in the middle of it, even if they've got a presenting issue. So I don't want to take a lot of time unpacking. Um, and so we try to work with the narrative material as much as possible. We don't bring in a lot of psychological language or coaching frames much. We just work with their stories in presence. And to Lisa's point, most students about halfway through the program go, "Oh, that's what he's been talking about the whole time," because it is a paradigm shift for many people. But it's one that I find that when you allow yourself to work this way, I've just found it way more effective than traditional coaching for most people. Um, yeah. Um, and it's also a lot of fun. So let me just share my screen again, and I want to just show you a couple of slides. Um, so, so first off, one of the points of for people in the beginning is we don't talk about coaching for a while. We talk about you as a human being and the mindset that you're bringing to coaching. And we are a firm believer and observer that we can only travel as far as we've gone ourselves. And there's a story, I'll tell you the story behind this photo I took when we get to class if you come. But um, so the beginning of the program is really about ourselves. How well can you actually hold space? How present can you actually be? How willing to be quiet are you? And the more that we mature and develop ourselves, the easier narrative coaching becomes. Um, so if I were to kind of characterize traditional coaching, many coaches are trained to really focus on asking powerful questions, which is great. It's good skills to have in coaching. And so we ask our client a question and they think about our question and then they give us an answer to the question. It all makes sense. And then we listen to very faithfully to their answer. And then we formulate an opinion or an idea or a thought about what we should ask them next. And so we have this, and a lot of the focus is on ourselves, trying to think about what to ask and about our methodology and structure that we brought to the conversation. All that's fine. There's nothing actually wrong with any of that. But for me, it's really highly limited because what happens, particularly for newer coaches, is they either get caught up conforming to the methodology or the ICF competencies, or they get caught up in the excitement of it all, and cycle starts to spin pretty fast, so they become in charge of the conversation. And so a lot of the feedback that we often give some of the newer coaches that come to our program is we invite them to please stop coaching because in that moment in time, because you're missing most of what's actually happening because you're so busy trying to be helpful and coach. So I look at this as like a beginner's view of coaching. And again, there's nothing wrong with these. These are all common experiences and good skills to have. But for me to kind of really advance in our ability to coach and understand coaching, I look at this very differently from a narrative coaching perspective. Um, so our primary role is to imagine that we're actually just walking alongside somebody, or is Dominique? Oh, cool. Well, let Dominique come in the room now. There he is. Um, Hello, Dominique.
Hi, David. Nice to be here. Sorry to be late.
No worries.
I'm
I'm
gonna have
just
to pop in
giving
and
them
out, but I wanted to get as much as I could.
great. So we put a lot of our attention in narrative coaching into the field, the energetic space between ourself and our client. We focus a lot on the relational dynamics as one of our resources to use in coaching. And whatever's occurring in the client and their stories, both in the telling and the content of the stories, we're bringing to the room so we can both look at it. So we use what the narrative therapist would call a lot of externalization to bring stories out of people and through their body and out so they can actually see them in real life. And so our primary job, if we imagine we're attending to that, we're stewarding that space, is we're trying to witness them. What are we noticing about them when they're telling their story? What are we noticing about what words they're choosing or gestures or metaphors? How does their story seem to be impacting them that they might not be aware of? So then when they're responding, they're not responding to our question, they're responding to our witnessing, which means they're inquiring into this moment in time. Like I noticed, you might say, I noticed as you talk about Bob on your team, your whole energy seems to change, or you kind of slump in your seat. We don't know what that means, nor do we need to know what that means, but we might say, in this moment, what's happening for you as you talk about Bob? What comes up for you? So now they're, rather than responding to us, they're narrating their own lived experience or their own awareness of their story or the awareness of how they're talking about their issue. And so they were listening again, just like we did in the first one, but we're now observing like what's now in the field that wasn't there before. And we witnessed that. Like it seems to be bringing you a sense of relief to talk about Bob this way. Is that helping you? Would you like to talk about Bob some more, or should we move on to something else? So it creates so we're not, again, trying to move the conversation forward or anywhere in particular. We're noticing what's kind of naturally arising in the field that might want some of our attention. The last thing I'll say here, and then I'll see if there's any thoughts or questions, but um, the fundamental narrative coaching question we're always asking ourselves at one way or another is, what does this person need most right now? So wherever they are on their journey, wherever they are in their story, what are they needing from this conversation or needing from me or needing from themselves? And so it keeps us coming back to the present moment, keeps bringing ourselves back to the client, not to ourselves, but to the space that we're working in and to the client themselves to try to understand what would be most useful for them. So there we often will slightly move our position in coaching, or we'll actually shift our role some, depending on um, where they are. And so like we try to move away from competency models because competency models often don't give enough attention to context. So you might have somebody that has just had a revelation to themselves about how they feel about something or what they really wanted or whatever. And if you say, oh, now's the time for some powerful questions. No, now's the time for tenderness and actually to hold them in this space of what they've just encountered. That's plenty of progress for right now. And any more in some ways would be often not helpful. So I'm going to stop there. Then I want to share the next slide, which has sort of just a basic frame of the model in terms of what makes this work unique. And then we'll kind of move on and talk more about it, what it looks like. But anything coming up for you for right now you'd like to ask?
I have lots of questions that I'd like to ask, but I think I do better to just be quiet and let you take us into the model.
Okay,
It's one of the things I've learned about myself.
excellent. Glad to be of service.
Yeah. What's coming up for me now is it's hard to process it. It's kind of turning it on its head, you know?
Yes.
I thought I heard you say at the beginning you don't set the goal.
No, we do not.
Yeah, so that's already like nah, right?
I,
So it'll be interesting to see how it works out because I'm just trying to process how this can happen, you know? I mean, I'm
yeah,
getting some snippets of it as in when you say holding the space, what's coming up for them right now, for us
yeah,
to be almost that extraction come mirror for them to reflect back what's coming up for them in their
yeah,
stories, right?
yeah.
I I I think I get that part, but you know, kind of not knowing where you want to go is I must say somewhat unsettling.
I mean, that's why we have Lisa here. That was Lisa's point. Um, so back when he was still alive, I used to debate Tony Grant all the time at conferences about goals, and because he was a big advocate for goals. But that one thing I'll just say is, well, two things I'll say. One is people have intentions. They have desires for a session. They want a new job. They want to be happier in their current job. They whatever's. So we hold that as a character. That's a character in their story, their desire, their intention, their wish. But we don't then fixate that as a goal that we can understand now for the future. Because there's a whole bunch of things we don't know. And the second piece is the person who's going to fulfill a goal is not the same person who sets it. The person who sets the goal often has no idea what they really want or why they want that, or and oftentimes the stated goal is a proxy for something else. So it might be in a cliched way, my goal is to lose 10 pounds. No, really what I would like is more appreciation from my partner to not judge me about my weight. But clients are not going to announce that when they come to coaching. They come, I want to be in better shape, or I want to lose some weight. And then if you just like, great, let's go set a goal and let's go set a plan to lose weight. You will miss 90% of what's really informed the goal in the first place. And they will not be, and their sense of agency will drop because they're now dependent on you to coach them through their pieces. And so my experience, especially in the world we live in now, that people, it's harder to discern what you really want. It's harder to discern the path to get what you really want. And so for me, I feel like goal setting was made for a completely different era that we don't live in anymore. And I'm trying to help people to increase their level of self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-agency, so that they can live in the emergent present that we all live in now, be more aware of their surroundings, more aware of their impact on their surroundings, and and aware of and trusting their own instincts to know what to do, rather than set some kind of goal in the artificial environment of a coaching session, which is unlike anything else in most of their life. And my observation is that for many people, their goals crumble when they go back to work or go back into the family dynamic that was causing them trouble in the first place. And so I just want to save a lot of time. It's not very, to me, it doesn't feel pragmatic to spend time on goals. I mean, we don't, if somebody's really insistent, I have to have a goal, that's how I work, then great. I'm not against using goals if that's of service to people. But in my experience for myself over time, it's not nearly as effective as we think. Um, so is that,
Sorry, David, would it be the same if I'm the coachee and I'd like to have an end in mind? Wouldn't that still be in some way, that destination or getting to some kind of a milestone? Would that maybe definition is goal, or is it, are we looking at that journey and defining some things along the way? What is it you wish for, what you want to uncover?
yeah,
Could it kind of, I mean, some way coexist? Because if
yeah,
they do wish to reach somewhere at some point, that's a goal line, right? In normal terms.
yeah,
But they may not be able to define it, granted. Some of them may
yeah.
not know what that is. But it's
Yeah,
still
so
something in mind.
yeah, so
You want to
again,
be.
I'm never going to turn down somebody who thinks they want something or thinks that they understand what would be helpful to them. And I think, like I said, holding in this space, whatever they've said is their intention or their goal line or whatever language you want to use is totally fine. And we do that even in narrative coaching. Um, but we don't then say, therefore, that's going to be the orientation of our session. Therefore, everything is going to do is in service of that goal. Therefore, we should be able to figure out right now how we're going to get there, which people often have no idea. So I'll give you a small example of this that to maybe illustrate. So there, I coached a senior manager of a large organization, and his stated goal, which he came with because he was very goal oriented, very driven, was I want to get a promotion to become the next level up in my organization. Great. So I don't dismiss that. I just say, okay, that's really interesting. And so one of our questions in Situate, which is where we begin. So tell me how you came to that decision. Tell me where that emerged. What's that about for you? And he said, and he give me all these like rational reasons and all these, oh, there's more money and and as I'm watching him telling me this, it's all true what he's saying. But if I'm just listening to the content, like if I close my eyes and just listened, even just we can any of us could create a structure by which somebody can get promoted. That's not that difficult. But there was something about the way he was telling me that was almost like he was over-efforting to justify what he was saying. Now, I don't know what that means. It's not my place to know what that means, but I just named that for him. I said, well, that's a lot of reasons, and somehow it's just not really landing with me. I'm just wondering if there's anything else that's going on. And well, and he's like hemming and hawing, and then I said, yes, there is something else going on. He just can't tell me yet. So then we create a stronger container of safety for him. And to make a long story short, then what came out of this conversation was he actually loved his job. He had no interest in a promotion really because he saw the headaches that created. So then we said, well, what do you want? And then he said, well, I've got my two kids are going off to college. I'm realizing I need more money. And the fastest way I know to make money is to do a promotion because there's a big bump in my pay. And I'm really stressing out about money. So this is the way I know how to resolve the problem. So now we have a very different conversation to be having. And so for me, if we had just gone after that goal of helping him get there, we might have been successful. It might even have worked. It might have, but it would never have resolved his fundamental emotional need, which was I need to feel more secure. And my confidence as a man in his culture was in question because if he wouldn't provide for his kids go to university, then it would make him look bad. And so there's a whole bunch of dynamics that became what we spent most of the rest of the coaching relationship talking about. And in the end, he opted not to apply for the promotion. He found other ways to take care of his need. And he said, if I get this job, I'm going to be homeless and I'll be more stressed and I'm not going to be happy. And then my wife's not going to be happy and blah, blah, blah. And he said, the cost of it's not worth it to me. There's other ways for me to resolve my problem. And so we believe, I'll just show you the next slide. So these are the 5 phases of narrative coaching. They're usually depicted differently, but this is the simple one. And sometimes, and you'll see this if you come to class, we do a thing where we give you 5 questions. That's all you get. But in our situate phase, which is the very beginning, that's just the welcoming. I see you. I hear you. I'm holding space for you. What are you noticing right now as you show up? And they're going to start telling you stories about whatever's going on for them. And we just listen until we get to a point where we feel like there's something there that's not working for them or quite right for them. And then we sort of call it out. So what's important to you about that piece you just shared? And that draws them into the journey of searching inside themselves, beginning to look at what shifts they'd have to make to be able to enact what they're discovering and what they feel called to do about what they're discovering. And then they come back out of that into sustain, which is what are they taking with them from the conversation that they want to do something about when they go back to their job or their home or wherever. And then the spiral is how big of a journey is this for them right now? And what's different for them as they leave the session. So in that, we're just welcoming people. We're not judging anything. We're not trying to change anything. We're just trying to help them be as honest with themselves as they can be. And then from that place, they get to the crux of their issue much sooner. And if we move on too quickly from situate, many in medicine, in medical school, it's what's called the doorknob moment that they actually now teach in some medical schools, whereby the vast majority of the most significant symptoms clients are bringing to the doctor are told when doctor gets ready to leave. Oh yeah, by the way, there's this other thing I'm curious about. And so now some places actually teach their doctors to leave the appointment a couple minutes early just to trigger the doorknob moment. So a lot of what people are really at coaching for is often hard for them to say out loud. It's sometimes even hard for them to recognize it in themselves. And so we want to make it as safe and welcoming as possible in the beginning so they can relax and just have a conversation with us. So how does that sound, Kitty?
I like structure. This gives some sense of a flow, and it helps kind of keep things together a little bit, but also allow that I suppose, you know, could probably stay in like a 1 and 2 for the longest time if they need that time to talk it out, right? It isn't a
Yes.
1 to 5 in a session kind of thing,
No.
potentially.
Sometimes
Yeah,
you
yeah.
do, but and
Okay, yeah,
sometimes,
sure.
yeah, go ahead.
No. I wonder if also based on this, do people get we say the equivalent to burnout, narrate out. It's like I tell stories most of the time. So if I perceive narrative being, a bit more telling the story about what
Yeah.
I'm going through, do they get narrate out? As in, I'm done with the storytelling moment. Is
There's some people don't tell stories easily. People like lower self-awareness. They don't, their brains work a bit differently, um, but it's such a natural human activity that it's not that rare. And it what when I would used to teach a lot of a modified version of all this in a lot of companies when I was living in Australia. The managers and leaders will always say, "Well, I don't have time for this. People take too long to tell a story. I just want to get to the point." I said, "Well, it doesn't happen the way you would like because not because they're telling too many stories, it's because you're not listening to them, right? You're waiting to find the action item so you can go do something, and you're too impatient to hear the whole story. And that my experience, unless somebody's really trying to process like something big for the first time, most people are pretty measured, particularly in the workplace around what they share and their stories. And so I want them to feel comfortable to share what they need to share. And the more present I am to them, ironically, or coincidentally, they actually talk less. So when I would do demos, most of them are 8 to 10 minutes. I don't need more time because we can sense what's happening pretty quickly and go there if we listen well enough to them. And yeah. And so, and um, as people get more comfortable with us and more comfortable a bit with silence, most people will find it easier to share more with their coach. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
thank you. Mm.
yeah. So let me just share a little bit about kind of narrative coaching itself. Um, yeah. So I mean, I have a PhD. I've written tons about narrative coaching just to give it a foundation. But in real life, we're not going to load you up like the poor woman on the left. There's stuff there you can read if you want, but we want you to feel like the person on the right. And what you'll find is that it seems a bit intimidating at first because we're used to kind of coming in with all of our stuff, our giant tool bag. And we're going to ask you to leave most of that at the door and bring in things when it provides scaffolding in the moment when the person needs that. So maybe a person struggling to find an emotion or struggling to become aware of an emotion that's in their body. They can use the things we've been trained to do to bring that out of them, but only then when it becomes useful to them. But by and large, you'll discover that once you get over the anxiety of not having a structure or goals automatically, that freedom actually starts to make a lot of more things possible. Um, and becomes, for me anyways, a much easier task. So let me just, yeah. So these are the sort of 6 principles of narrative coaching. I want to just sort of talk about them, and then we can talk some more about the program. So the first, and if you forget all the rest of these, just remember the first one. Uh, rather than trying to sit back and try to figure out what we should be doing next as a coach, we're just trusting that everything's happening right in front of us, across the screen or in person. And even if you get lost, sometimes clients get confused there, or they tell confusing stories. And we're humans, and sometimes we lose our focus, or we say, I have no idea what they're talking about. Well, just keep coming back to the present moment. What's in front of me right now? Oh, somebody is still talking about X. X must be really important to them. I'm going to try to find out more. Um, a lot of what we're doing in narrative coaching is helping ourselves and our clients be more attentive to what is as opposed to what should be or what could be, but what is true right now. And to do that in a way which is often very important for our clients without any judgment of them. So as part of our philosophical roots, we tend to avoid things like good and bad. We just look at what is. It just helps people drop some of their defenses and get clear about what they want to do. I find much more easily. One of the things, if you were to watch one of the demos of me, or you would find that you end up talking less. And this famous quote from Ram Dass just keeps reminding us that silence is curative in itself, or is activating itself. And that we're really only speaking when we can improve on it, which isn't as often as we think. And if we trust everything's right there in front of us, then things are already happening. So a friend of mine was having to make some big decisions a couple of days ago, so I called her up. She ran a session using my own work back on myself, and then a whole bunch of things happened that were just amazing. And then we were going to do some more, and she said, she just quoted me back to myself. We don't need to do more. Everything we've done is already now in motion. It will manifest itself. And so there's much less efforting in narrative coaching because we're trying to just, again, walk alongside the person and the process that's underway, contributing where we can. But again, we don't, we, if a conversation stops dead in the water because we've stopped asking questions, it probably was not going to be a great conversation to begin with. And so we want to be able to let the conversation have a life of its own. And yes, we're responsible because they're paying us to hold that space as a coach. Yes, we're responsible perhaps to stakeholders. But again, almost paradoxically, our responsibility often is to do less and trust that the process will unfold. So the fourth one is, for me personally, coaching is often too cognitive, and most change doesn't happen at a cognitive level, at least lasting change. And so we want to be able to create experiences and experiments with people. And by that I mean, let's have maybe somebody that's a new leader, and they were promoted because they have great expertise in their field and people like them and they do well on their projects, but they secretly are petrified of having to speak in public or to tell other people what to do or give people, strong feedback. Well, yeah, we could coach them through how to do that and what it takes to do that, and we could explain why it is that way, and we can offer them all kinds of things. But if for them, they have never spoken up in their life, because maybe in their household or in their culture, because of their gender or their whatever, they were not given permission or even allowed to speak up in that way. So they're in their mind, in this totally subconsciously to them, they're like part of them saying, "Hey, that never went well before. Why do we think it's going to work well now?" And so before we teach them anything about speaking to a group or public speaking or uh, influencing people or any of that stuff, they have to be able to, can I allow myself to even raise my voice? If they can't have that experience, all those other skills are not very useful. And so we might generate an experience. I might tell them, and I've had these clients, I want you to say something out loud to me. And then they'll say something, and it's often not very loud, and I'll say, just raise it 10%, and then another 10%. And then if they're really brave, then they'll go out and yell at me. And the whole purpose is, then we just like sit quietly for a minute after they do that, because it's often shocking to them. We don't try to talk about it right away because then the impact diminishes. What are you noticing about yourself right now? I've wanted to do that my whole life. How does it feel to be having done that? It feels so free. And so then I might say, do it again. And all you're doing with this is generating an experience that's now a foundational stone for them to stand on to learn how to speak in public. That's the self that they're going to become to be a speaker. So the person who say in this case, set the goal of I need to feel more confident speaking in public, that person's not going to be able to do that. we have to then find a way for them to discover the part of themselves that can do that, which is in most everybody, and we want to generate experiences to help them do that. So we use all the elements in the field, all the things that are around us to help them do that so that they can have like a whole-bodied experience in being able to rewrite their story and allow themselves to have um, a new place to begin from which to do the things they've told you they most want to be able to do. So I'm just going to stop there, and I'll just take this down for a minute, and we'll come back to the last bit about the program in a minute. But I just want to take this down and see kind of how you are now.
It sounds like it it demands quite a bit from the client as well to be able
Mhm.
to dig deep and be comfortable with sharing the stories. And I know the role of the coach is to create that safe space,
Mhm.
so that they can share. But I'm just thinking of a couple of people where the access to them is through the rational,
Mhm.
through the head.
Mhm.
I can't see them going down into very deep stories unless there are a couple of sessions, that you have the
Mhm.
luxury of a couple of sessions.
Yeah.
So question is, does this apply, in cases where there is a clear goal that you've been engaged because their boss thinks that they need to improve in certain areas,
Yeah.
right? So how does that figure?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So um, for people with no real access to themselves, this work can be a bit hard. But
Mm,
I've coached a lot in tech companies with highly rational people that struggle with their bodies, struggle with emotions, struggle with pretty much anything that's not in their head. And so we use things like words or gestures or metaphors rather than not everything has to be a deep story. So like I ended up coaching anyways, there was a CEO of one of my clients who was outed over the weekend for breaking some laws. And so he was CEO on Friday. By Monday morning, he was not. And so I just happened to be in their offices on that Monday to coach a bunch of the leadership team about some other stuff. And of course, they're all in panic because and so there was one woman that was the most senior executive and the one everybody wanted to be in charge, but she wanted coaching. Our coaching then became about that, not what we had intended. Did she want to take up that role? And I'll fast forward to the point of the story. She was talkative, but also very much in her head. And the whole story and what allowed her to choose pivoted down to a 30-second anecdote that she sort of threw away about her daughter. But there was a phrase in that story I said, note to self, that's going to come back. And sure, it became the frame by which she made her choice. So there's things even in shallower stories, because from a Jungian psychological perspective, there's parts of this person that would like to be out there more, that maybe they can't for whatever reason, but it comes out in their stories. So you might say, oh, I noticed you sit on your hands when you're getting to that part of the story or when you seem to be feeling something or and so we can coach them to be a little bit more of who they are that in that way but clinics are not required to do narrative coaching they can talk with smaller stories and we can use the characters in that stories the physicality of those stories to work with them just fine and yeah uh, yeah. And
okay.
so I'll give you another example. A guy that was the linchpin of an entire very well-known startup tech company. It's now quite big. He was a wizard at algorithms, and was his company was far more reliant on him than they realized. And but he wasn't a very sophisticated person. He had not gone to much college. He just figured it out by the seat of his pants in a way. Um, but he was now being called into all kinds of meetings with the press and other things that were just way out of his comfort zone. And so again, I could try to teach him all those things, but he said it's grounded in a place. He'd grown up on the streets, literally. Um, and said, so just imagine I'm back in your hood and you're 16. How would you talk about it then? And he went just wham, went right into character. And so I just let him run with it for 5 minutes. Now, none of that would be acceptable in a boardroom. But I said, you know how to stand up for yourself. You know how to be clear. You know how to be strong. So come from that place. Now we're going to add on some words that these people are going to want to hear. Again, he was a very, very smart person, but not a very educated person, not very sophisticated, not very, he liked being left alone with his team to make hundreds of millions of dollars on behalf of his company. And so, again, the value of situate. Who is this person? How do I make them feel welcome here? How can I meet them exactly there and nowhere else? Um, and yeah. And so it works just fine. And even if they have a specified objective, because somebody said you're into coaching for X, fine. We'll bring X to the room. But imagine here's X, right? And so, and we might even gesture at this. Like, what's that? Tell me what that's about. How do you feel about that when you notice that? I might get them to draw a picture on the board. I might get them to do whatever. And we can just start to circle. So we think about this as like circling these kind of intentions rather than going towards them. We just circle them. What do you notice about this? And how do you feel about this? And does this resonate anywhere in your body? Or how did this offer come to be? And the reality is we can, going back to your question, Kitty, we can stay very focused on their intention or the objective that was given them. We're just not going to grasp it as if we think we know what it means. We're going to hold it lightly and just circle it and start to explore it. And then the true purpose for why it's there will reveal itself to us. And that's where we spend our time, because that's the next thing that they're going to be able to do. And that's all. If they're not ready for it, it doesn't matter how clever we are.
Sorry, Lisa, are we taking up too much time in questions? Yeah, because I'm also mindful about time. It
Okay.
is midnight our time here. And for me, I would like to know like the number of modules,
Yep.
the timing,
Sure.
if it's full, I suppose it's fully virtual.
Yes.
Online. So the frequency, yeah, I think I just like to understand the logistics of the delivery.
Be happy to. So this is it's 9 modules over 9 months. So each module is about a month long. Each one has the same structure. So we have two women that have been working with me for quite some time in the narrative coaching space. So they're going to run the 2 live sessions. The good news is that you get the same material spoken by me as you would get anyways, but now you've got one more extra session to debrief and practice. So we've really shifted the focus. We use some of our other work in integrative development to redesign the structure so that that there's better retention and more practice in particular. Um, and narrative coaching becomes clearer the more you do it, because again, it's different for many people. But so I'll record all of the core information for each module, and I'll walk you through all the slides. I'll be available in the forum that we offer online for any questions. We've also got 3 Q&A sessions spread out through the program, and I'll be at those as well as the orientation. And then in the immersion session, we're going to invite you to explore like what did you take from David's talk and the video content? And this is really just like, are you grasping the basic sense of what this module is about? Then we're going to put you into some small groups in your time zone and allow you to, you have assignments and you can do them or not, but we have assignments there to start practicing. Like, what sense did you make of this? And where should we begin practicing? And what do we think about all this? And it's just kind of sort of get a deeper understanding of the basic building blocks of that particular module. And then, and so then we went from everybody to a pod, and then in week 4, it's yourself. And so what can you do on your own? So we're going to give you a couple of assignments. Again, use them, adapt them, whatever suits you. But these are ways for you to go out and practice certain things on your own in daily life or in your coaching or whatever, to kind of reinforce what you're discovering along the way of the module. And then in the integration session, you're going to come back with the same faculty person. To like, what was all that and where are you now? And are you leaving with any questions that you can address? But mostly this is around you demonstrating what you've kind of discerned from that module, what you've already taken on in yourself as a way to help you confirm your own integration to the best of your ability. um, the, um, the modules themselves, again, these first three are mostly about the mindset of a narrative coach. And so we want to help you kind of transition from maybe other starting points to begin. What would it be like to start here? Um, Focusing on your presence, focusing on the coaching relationship, and then focusing on holding space for the conversation. The next three are all about the narrative coaching process itself and how to use that to help people learn and grow. And then we have a whole module just on story work itself. Um, and then the last three are about the three uh, primary narrative coaching skills, narrative inquiry, narrative listening, and then what we call creating structures for success so that people can take what they've learned in the session and have a much better chance of enacting it when they go back. Um, Yeah, and then these are just some other things that kind of come along with this. We got like I said, some bonus resources on certain topics. You'll have a chance through the forum and through the community to connect with graduates, and some of them, like Lisa, might be here as well. And it's always a great resource for you as people starting out. You have training hours that you can use for any certifications you're a part of, and we'll give you a certificate of completion and a little tagline you can put on your email if you want as a graduate. Um, so those are sort of the basics of what's in the program. Um, are there anything else that comes up that feels important to you?
So each module goes through that 5 weeks.
Yes.
Yeah, so the face-to-face time online is where you watch the video. So that's the how much time is that out of the 7 to 8 where we have to
Yeah.
be mm,
Yeah. So the immersion session and the integration session are the only two live sessions. The initiation is something I'm creating ahead of time, so you can just watch it before you get to the immersion session. And there normally would be like 45 minutes or so, maybe an hour, but hopefully closer to 45. Um, yeah, so that and the two live sessions, plus then doing your assignments and things for the average person is about 7 or 8 hours a month.
so the week 1 and the week 5 you're saying would be
Live,
the act
yes.
online
Mhm.
and time for these sessions?
They're 90 minutes.
No, I mean not the duration, as in what time of day that
Oh
it's
yeah,
not
yeah. So they're at 10 a.m. Eastern time and 6 p.m. Eastern time.
10 a.m. would be 11 p.m. our time.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and it runs for about that 45 minutes you mentioned.
No, my video will be about 45 minutes. The two live sessions are 90 minutes each.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. We need to take afternoon naps on those days.
Yeah, it's a
Well,
bit rough
you have the choice though, David. Like you have the
yes,
10 a.m. or the 6 p.m. Like there's two time slots that you can choose from based on your time zone.
yeah. And they're all recorded as well, so you'll have a chance to come watch them if you miss them.
Okay. And I suppose the final it would be the investment.
Yeah, so just given the conditions of the world this year, we decided to lower the price a bit. It's not on the slide. So it's 29.97. Yeah. And you can just find out more right here.
And when does it start, or does it go in batches, or you can start anytime you're ready?
No, it goes all in one giant fun batch of people, and it starts in the middle of March in about 30 days.
Okay.
And
And
it
is there
runs
a
through.
certain class size that you're looking at?
Is there a certain class size?
Yeah.
We've
How
had
big is
anywhere.
how big is the group?
I don't know. We'll see.
Ah,
We just started sales, so we don't know yet. But and yeah, the groups have tended to range anywhere from 25 to 60.
wow.
Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Back in the WBEX days, we would have like 500, but that was an anomaly. Um, yeah.
Okay. I think that's all from my side. And thank you so much for sharing with us,
Yeah.
giving us some idea on what it is all about.
Yeah.
Probably Lillian will just have a quick chat, see how,
Mm.
you're going to move forward.
Yeah, that would be great. And
Yeah.
we get a lot of people come in from other kinds of coaching backgrounds, and it does take some adapting in the beginning, but then they find that it's actually liberating for them to get away from some of those structures and just I just think of coaching as an intentional conversation in service of someone who needs some help. And
Mm.
I find this kind of coaching was never the point. It was just a way of being with somebody. And so it kind of decenters coaching and it sits in the background. And I will use my coaching skill and my coaching mindset as it's useful for this person to have an effective conversation, a generative conversation.
Sure.
Yeah. So, yeah. Anything else from you, Cheryl, before you go?
Yeah, I had a couple of other questions, but I think most were covered already.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you can also just reach out to us if at any point if you have more questions.
Yeah. Well, actually, I had one, but I'm just
Sure.
commenting that it's quite late already. But maybe if you could just address quickly, um, there's been a lot of stuff for me, at least coming through my feed on brain-based coaching,
Uh-huh.
right? The neuroscience of coaching and stuff.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that?
Um, some of them, some of them are quite great. And it's important information. It's useful to understand it. My question about those always is, do people know what to do with it? Or does it actually change their practice or just seem interesting? Um, so like for me, one of the things that um, many of the things which seem novel to people about narrative coaching, I've actually written a PhD about them. There's a lot of depth to them. I didn't just make them up. Um, and so it's the important thing for me is around understanding, and if you don't understand how people change, then it's really difficult to be a very effective coach. Because then you're just going to be caught up in your own coaching. So understanding some things about how our brains work could be really helpful. And there's a few slides where we address that in the narrative coaching program. Um, uh, and for me, I just default back to what are we noticing is helpful to the client? Let's stay close to that. Um, and so, like for me, I would just watch. I watch some podcasts every now and then, or I read a few books just so I understand what's the latest thinking of all this. But there's no quiz at the end of this to see, did you memorize all the 12 parts of the brain? It's really, can you use information like that to adapt your coaching style to address different kinds of people? And so, like for me, if I'm going into like a literal like geographic culture or a type of work environment that I don't have a lot of familiarity with, I will do some background research. What kind of people work in those spaces? What do we know about that culture? So that I can start to understand how they might be thinking about their stories, so I can be better prepared. Um, but yeah,
Okay, thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, great. And are you guys going to take off now?
Yes.
I
You
am going to.
Yes, it's late
all
for you,
right.
so I understand
Have
totally.
yes, have a good day ahead for you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank
Be
you.
well. Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you, David. Nice to
You're
see
most
you,
welcome.
Lisa and Dominic, for that
Yeah.
fleeting moment.
All
All right.
right,
Lisa.
bye.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So Dominic, you're back. So you've I'm
Yeah,
just
I'm
checking with
sorry.
you
I
and
had a
Lisa.
coaching session that got scheduled right in the middle of your.
No, yeah, it's all good. So Lisa, just we'll start with you to sort of what's up for you in terms of how I can be helpful for you in this time.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's just so much benefit to kind of moving through the material again, like just with a fresh set of eyes and going in. I'll even when you talk about it, I'm just finding myself,
Yep, yep.
which is quite different to first time around, which is kind of like, you know, so
Yes.
yeah, and for me, it's just about looking at scheduling and capacity again. I don't want to be, letting down a peer pod or something if I can't fully commit. Because
Yeah.
I'm also doing guiding lights right now as well too.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's
Yeah, and one of the things we'll do differently this year than ever before is that we will give people options about peer pods ahead of time, so you can pick one that's more likely to work for you as opposed to having to negotiate, which often proves difficult.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of people have done we like every year we have about 10 or 12 people that do it again and love it, and they say, I feel like I'm kind of cheating. I feel like I'm starting like halfway through the program, but now the beginning makes so much more sense than it made the first time. And yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Thank you.
You're
And I'll
welcome.
let you go because I know Dominic has a lot of questions.
Okay,
All
excellent.
right. Take
I
care.
didn't
Nice
know
to see
that.
Take
you.
care, Lisa. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, because I said it earlier. Well, hi. So I'm sorry to pop in and out. Um, I got a little flavor of it, and I've read some of your stuff, and I have a little flavor of it. It just a little bit about me. So for like the last 25 years, I've done mostly facilitation work
Uh-huh.
in organizations. Um, and that means groups from 20 to 400.
Mhm.
And actually, when I started this work before coaching really took off, my mentor said, you always have to coach the leader, right? And
Mm,
there weren't any ICF steps to it.
yeah,
It was the things you talked about. I just heard you talking about. Get to know the organization. What kind of work do they do? What's important for them? And always, what's the deeper question below the surface question?
yeah.
You know, so the little that I heard makes tremendous intuitive sense to me.
Mm,
Um, what might be helpful if you're willing to do it is just I saw a couple of slides, but I didn't see as any details on the program. That might be helpful just to have like I
okay.
don't understand the pods and that type of thing. If that's in the recording and I can look at it
It
later.
is. Yeah, we just did that a few minutes before you got here.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's in the recording, and there's 9 modules over 9 months, and there's 2 live sessions, plus a recording of me talking through all the core content. The big change we made this year was to give more opportunities for students to practice sooner as a way
Okay.
to improve, as opposed to feeling like they had to understand everything before they could practice. Or having practices that, in my mind, were great foundations for narrative coaching, but because they didn't really know narrative coaching yet, they didn't quite get the connection. So we've tried to make it more overt, so that the practices are more directly related to the skills for that particular module.
Okay. Okay. Um, so I think that I heard you getting some of this question. There's a question that I heard that was kind of like, wow, this is a shift from the more
Yeah,
goal-oriented kind of
yeah,
coaching, that type of thing. And the answer that you gave, actually, I loved, which was actually, this is more pragmatic
yeah, yeah,
because, in the
yeah,
end, you are just trying to help the client go where they truly want to go
yeah,
rather than impose a structure on them.
yeah.
The challenge I have, so I have coached people for 10 years. I've done 2 ICF accredited coaching programs. I've never taken the time to actually go through the ICF accreditation
Hmm.
process. Um, And what I run up against is basically two things happen for me. I either get people who don't really care that I'm not ICF accredited, and
Mm.
generally it goes really well. But then I have other places that are like one or two things. Where's your ICF accreditation? Okay, you're not going to solve that for me. I got to figure that out. But the second thing is like I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I had a guy from Dow Chemical,
Mhm.
and he was a low-level VP, talented IT guy, and they had, I talked to the chief information officer. He had a very clear, we want Bernardo to get here, this
Mhm.
kind of thing. Um, and so how do you respond to that when it's this thing of we've already determined what somebody's goal is for them, right?
Mm.
We want
Well,
them to be a more focused presenter in meetings. We want them to blah, 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 blah,
yeah.
that kind of stuff.
So I was sharing with Kitty, you can make space in the conversation for the stakeholders' objectives. Um, and it behooves the person to address them, to not ignore them. But we don't know what that really means. And I just find coaches take too much of that at face value and just rush in before they really understand what's really going on here. And we don't know what the ultimate best outcome is for the client yet because we've just started the conversation. And
Right.
so I think it's, we have due diligence to, just kind of keep it present in the room and keep coming back to it. And so there's some kind of resolution. You don't just leave it hanging there. But, um, and so sometimes like people end up quitting their job as a result of coaching. That was never part of the remit, but that was the truth for them, right? That was the outcome of their clarification process. Um, so we're not errand boys and girls for the bosses that sponsor us, right?
Yeah,
We're there
right.
to respect the request, try to understand the motivation for the request, or we have to be smart about that. But um, the person's got to be able to be authentically able to engage with the journey. Otherwise, it's A, not going to work very well, and B, even if it does work well, it's not going to end well. And so, the client will need to make some decisions, but that's what they decide is completely up to them. And they might decide, no, I'd rather get better at my job this way, or I'd rather not, I'm realizing this job's too much for me. I don't even want to be in this job. I want to go back to my old job or whatever. Um, and I think it's part, and my other sort of more slightly cynical view is a lot of these requests are well-intentioned. And most leaders have no concept what it actually takes to change a human behavior.
Agreed.
And you say, please wave your coaching wand, and especially if it's ICF, then we guaranteed to be gold-plated wand.
That's right.
No, um, and make them better or make them be different. And for me, it's not. I don't do that. That's not my job.
Yeah. How much do you say that up front?
I'm
If
very
you're gonna work
clear.
with me, this is what you get.
Exactly. And there are some clients who really they just want somebody to go make something happen, and I say, well, I don't find that very ethical or effective. But if you want that, go find somebody else because I will take that. I'm not going to, like I said, avoid it, move away from it, sabotage it. I want that to be successful. I mean, the ultimate outcome would be the client and the sponsor both win. They both get what they want, right? That's the ultimate outcome, but it doesn't always work that way. Um, and the same as if I have stakeholders who I need to know what I want a debriefing after every session. I said, I can't give you that.
No,
I won't give you that.
no.
It's privileged information with the client and myself. Now I can, with client's permission, I can signal themes or things that the client. Um, and so I think it's for me just honoring what's trying to happen in the coaching conversation as a sacred space, and then figuring out what are the implications of that in terms of what the client wants to do.
No.
And then, and for example, the client gets to the end of that conversation and realizes, no, I don't want that job. I don't know. I appreciate the offer, but no, I don't want that. So then the coaching might be, well, how are you going to tell your boss this?
Right, of course.
Which is then a different conversation, but we won't know that until they get to more of their truth. Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, that resonates a lot with what my experience. Actually, the the guy that I just worked with is a vice president in a hospital. When I first started working with him in July, he was working 13-hour days, 6 days a week.
Wow.
And we kind of got to this deeper question of, you know, what are you really here for?
Hmm.
And ultimately, and it was, I'm really committed. It's Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. We have some of the sickest kids in the country. I'm here to serve them.
Yeah.
Are you really serving them
Mhm.
when you're exhausted, pushing yourself on caffeine, you know, and just running around putting out one fire after another? And we've gotten to a place where now he's working 8 to 9 hour days.
Huh.
He's getting a good night's sleep. He's really working to empower other people who his direct reports to take on more, to free him up to be more of a strategic thinker rather than a
Mhm.
crisis solver.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I mean, and it actually, the very funny thing, David, is we've never signed a formal coaching agreement. He thought he was too busy for coaching. We were just going to have a couple conversations last summer.
Huh. Yeah.
Now he won't go a week without talking to me.
Wow. Oh,
And,
I'm
and again,
grateful to you.
that's not to say I'm his guru or anything, but it just he's now
Yeah.
realized that having this space once a week really benefits him.
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh, and as the CEO just invited, he just came back from a week in the Cayman Islands where the CEO insisted that he come even though he's not C-suite
Wow.
because he's now shown to be so valuable as such a strategic thinker for the organization. But he could only get to that once he got off his 13-hour caffeine fueled.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this just all that is simply say this makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sorry I had to pop in and out. I'll go back and look at the recording.
Okay.
Um, I just want to clarify. So in the program, it's 2 live sessions with you. Everything else is recorded, and then there's pods. Is that right?
No.
Okay.
So thank you for asking. So I can clarify. So I will record the core content for each module to start the module. You can watch that before the first live session, which either Vicki or Emma will run, depending on whether you come in the morning or afternoon. You'll do some things the second week with, well, let me just put this back up. Um, that way I can talk to it. There we go. Um, yeah. So I record the video, you watch the video, you come to the session with the faculty, then you do some work in your pod, then you do some work on your own, then you come back with your whole group again to kind of figure out what was that all about, what are you taking with you, um, yeah, to reflect and discuss what you've figured out. And we've really deepened the design to give you more chances to practice sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah.
So then the direct interaction with you is where it's not recorded is what?
So for me, because so I had long COVID for 2 years, and
Yeah, I remember you saying that. I was on a different call with you. Yep.
yeah, and I need to move on to finish a couple of books, and so we've invited two people that have taught with me before quite often, and are really they're both seasoned mentors and supervisors as coaches, so they're actually in some ways more better placed to support practice than I am because I've done
Mm-hmm.
this for so long. So, but you still get all the content from me you would get in a normal every other year in the program.
Okay.
But we're going to let them handle the two practice sessions, the immersion and integration sessions. And then I'll come to orientation. We've got a special Q&A session at the end of the third, sixth, and ninth module. I'll be there for those to take any more questions. I'll be in the forum in the learning space if you have questions or want to share anything. And then I'll come to the celebration at the very end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. I will tell you, and for me, that's disappointing
Yes.
because I mean, having live David is better than recorded David, and I don't doubt that your two folks, your faculty, are great, but they didn't write the books.
No. But again, hopefully through the forum and through the Q&A sessions, you'll be able to get some of that done. And I'm going to focus more of my time on the live retreats we're running. And yeah, and we're moving towards a different kind of learning community later in the year. And so again, more chances to practice and get feedback and stuff. So
Okay.
yeah,
And am I right that you're now based in Amsterdam?
you are.
Okay. So the live retreats you're going to run, will those be in Europe or in North America or where?
Well, so for now, we're just running these retreats virtually until we kind of get them established. And I ran retreats live for well over a decade and loved them and would like to go back to do them again. So most likely I'll start here in Europe and then kind of branch out to go back to Australia where I lived for a while and have taught often, and then probably do some things in the States. But yeah,
Okay.
trying to be a
But
little carbon. Hmm?
I'm sorry. I appreciate the low carbon part.
Yeah.
I'm very much with you. So are you running virtual retreats now? Because if you are, I don't know about those.
Yeah, so we had one that started about a month or so ago, and we'll have another one starting in April. And you can go on, and I think it's still on the website, but they're just called the Guiding Lights Retreats.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then in those, you're running those, is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And is there an info session for that, or can you give me the quick summary? What happens at the Guiding Lights retreat?
Yeah. So um, so I developed a body of work last year, building on work I'd done for a long time about the future of coaching and how do we create great coaches and my railing against competency models. So I
Yeah.
created this pretty extensive report, sort of critiquing competency models and offering a framework that came to be called the five maturities.
Yeah.
And so each of the maturities is a foundation for one of the masteries, of which competency is only one. And then so there's that. That's the primary orientation for the retreat. So we have like an introduction, then we have two sessions around each of the five masteries, and then we have a closing session coming up. And then in that, each first session in a pair is about that maturity, say personal maturity. And then the second session is sort of the threshold to the next maturity, which in this case is spiritual maturity, which is what we're doing this week about grief. And that there's a whole series of topics I used to teach a lot on grief, trauma, attachment theory, shadow, etc. And those serve as the transitions between the maturities. So they're all very much around your own personal journey. I'm not teaching you the five maturities. They're just the basis for the discussions and the practices. We have pods there as well. And it's just an opportunity for people to use the five maturities framework to get some more clarity about where they want to spend their energy in terms of their own growth as a human being.